Sonic Frontiers came out in 2022, and it was completely different from what the franchise had ever seen. It introduced an open zone gameplay style where Sonic could run around freely and have bosses unlike the series had ever seen. This was Sega's last-ditch effort to save Sonic after years of mediocrity from Forces and Boom. If this didn't work, it might have been over for the Blue Blur. Fortunately, this game is one of the best-selling games in the entire series, and it did great things to put Sonic back in the limelight. But it didn't come without its flaws, obviously. Looking back on this game 4 years later, and opinions have sort of shifted on it for many people. So, let's look back at Sonic Frontiers and see what sets this game apart and why I think people should give it a second chance. Now, just as a disclaimer, I have not seen a review on this game in at least 3 years, so I'm going into this with a fresh perspective. Also, footage will be a mix of different systems, but mostly Switch 2. So, I'm sure that many of us remember the hype cycle leading up to Frontiers. Fans were eager for something new. After all, it had been 5 years since the last 3D Sonic game. The first CGI trailer looked promising, hinting at the fact that this would be a more story-based game. And as we saw more and more, things looked really empty. That one IGN livestream really did not do any good for this game. The world seemed very big, sure, but it didn't look like there was anything to do in it. But alas, the game was released in November of 2022, and it was received pretty good. I originally picked up the game on Switch 1, and oh boy do I regret that. The Switch 1 port is atrocious. There are so many problems with it. The performance sucks, pop-in is worse, and it looks so terrible. Because of that, I was really turned off from this game and didn't really like it at all. And that was despite the fact that I was heavily anticipating it. But picking it up later down the line on PC and even Switch 2, my opinion has very much changed. I guess I'll start by talking about the gameplay. Like I mentioned, this is what Sega calls an open zone game, which was a big factor in the marketing. This formula works very well for Sonic, being able to just blast around these massive spaces while grinding on rails using the Psy-Loop and taking down enemies feels awesome. At a certain point, you can kind of enter a flow state with the movement, and if something is bothering you, there are plenty of settings you can tweak with the movement sliders. On top of that, there's a skill tree too. This allows Sonic to learn new moves and access the training simulator if you want to fine-tune your skills. This is a very great way to implement combat into the game in my opinion. Memorizing the moves and chaining combos feels very satisfying. I get that combat isn't for everyone, I can say that with certainty looking at Unleashed reviews, but I genuinely think if you replay this game, you should just give the combat one more shot. It's really fun. Building on this system though, throughout the open zones you can find various Coco and Seeds, which you can bring to their respective Hermit and Elder Coco to level up your damage, defense, speed, and ring capacity. Fully upgrading these skills really pays off, because not only does the extra speed make the game just that much more fun, but it also makes the combat breezier if you aren't a fan of it and just want to get it over with. Now, talking about the open zones themselves can be a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them are really good, but then some of them are just kind of okay. Chaos Island is definitely the worst out of all of them. It's very clunky to navigate, there are tons of sections that just automatically put you into a 2D platforming section when you're just trying to get from point A to point B, and there are tons of bottomless pits everywhere. But then some of them, like Kronos Island and Uranos Island, are genuinely so well crafted that you could just spend hours running around in those maps alone. The biggest problems with these islands though is the pop-in, the randomness, and the emptiness. I kind of talked about emptiness in the beginning with the IGN livestream, and Sega did their best to mitigate the emptiness, but it's still very present in some parts. The way they tried to fix the emptiness was by placing these random platforming and rail grinding sections everywhere on the map. The placement can feel very random and hard to avoid. When running around, you'll often find yourself starting a platforming section you did not mean to get into. Not a lot of it feels very purposeful at all. And then there's the pop-in, which just makes the random placement worse. 1 second there will be nothing in front of you, the next second you've bounced on a spring and now you're on a rail. If you look just past Sonic, it's very noticeable sometimes. Now, of course, there are mods to fix this on PC, and the problem was actually lessened a lot on Switch 2, but if you don't have access to either of those versions, then it can be very annoying to deal with. And just before I wrap this section up, although there are movement sliders to make the movement suit your personal playstyle, some of the geometry on the islands can kind of just cause Sonic to flip off the ground and start tricking. It can get really annoying when you are just trying to boost and go fast, and then all of a sudden you get knocked into the air. I found it was most present on Chaos Island with all of the weird little ancient slabs or whatever on the floor, so that gives me just another reason to hate that island. So yeah, if you can't already tell, there is a ton to do in this game. Now, for the people just craving that feel of a traditional 3D Sonic game, let me introduce you to Cyberspace. Just take a look at this. Okay, well, now that you've seen that, what do you think? I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I like Cyberspace. Okay, hear me out. There are definitely flaws with it, that much I am aware of, but some of these levels are actually really good. My favorite example is 1-2. On the surface, it seems pretty easy, but if you want that S rank, you're gonna have to work for it. You'll have to learn the routes, find out where to and where not to perform a homing attack. It's just very well crafted. There are few levels in the game like this one, but the more challenging ones are very fun. But that's also one of the main problems: challenge. Majority of the Cyberspace levels are a genuine cakewalk. Getting all of the missions completed can take under 5 minutes for a lot of them. Another problem, this one probably being the biggest: unless you've played the game, you won't really know what I'm talking about because I can't describe it, but something just feels off about the controls. Certain levels also have gimmicks like skateboarding and drifting, but they feel so awful to handle, and I have no clue why they would lock the drift behind a dash pad looking thing. There's also the red rings, which are overall fine, but there are some levels where taking the faster route means you miss out on the red rings. It's almost like the game is punishing you for going fast. So, while overall, some of the Cyberspace levels can be pretty clunky, majority of it is still very enjoyable and very replayable. Okay, well, I think that covers majority of the gameplay for now. So, let's move on to the story. Starting off, the game shows the gang on the tornado flying to the Starfall Islands. Suddenly, they get sucked into a digital portal, and that's where Sonic and them are transported to cyberspace. Sonic manages to make it out using the power of speed, but the others weren't so lucky. Then, a voice in the sky tells Sonic to go grab the Chaos Emeralds. And after that, you're pretty much off into the game. It's a very brief intro, but to be honest, that's kind of exactly what Frontiers needed. Just throw you into the gameplay and answer the questions later. But to sum the rest of it up, Eggman and Knuckles are also trapped in cyberspace, and Eggman uses the help of his, daughter, I guess, Sage, who takes control of the Titans and tells Sonic to leave. So obviously Sonic doesn't leave, and then he defeats the Titans across 3 islands. Along the way, he learns that the cyber corruption is slowly killing him, and that big voice in the sky turns out to be evil. What a shocker. So Sonic's friends resurrect him in a way that was much better than what Sega was cooking in 2006. And he teamed up with Eggman to defeat the End. Okay, did you get that all? I hope so. I really don't want to go into further detail with the story because it gets really confusing with the Ancients and how Chaos connects to this, and that's just a headache I don't want to deal with. Now, talking about the Titans themselves, I mentioned them before as being unlike the series had ever seen. These bosses are massive. The best part about them is that they're all so different, and they're all really fun. Just not when you're doing the Grand Coco Challenge, but we'll get to that later. After collecting the Chaos Emeralds from the first 3 islands, Sonic obtains the last emerald by climbing the Titans and taking it off of their heads. I don't know why, but the scene that plays here always reminds me of how Thanos rips Vision's Infinity Stone out of his head. After that, he transforms into Super Sonic and has to take them down. I think that the way they are embedded into the gameplay and story is really neat, and it makes it a lot more immersive. This is 100% probably going to be one of the hottest takes I have in the entire series, but I really do not like the vocal tracks that play on these bosses. We'll talk more about the soundtrack later, but I just had to get that out there. So unlike Sonic Heroes, this game actually has really good bosses. Then, after the first 3 islands, Sonic has to go scale up some pillars in the 4th, and the 5th island is just rinse and repeat from the first 3. Get the Chaos Emeralds, transform into Super Sonic, fight the boss. This boss is probably my least favorite out of the 4, especially the end part where you play on hard difficulty. I don't know what they were cooking when they made this part. It's still not terrible, but it's just not as hype as the other ones. Okay, now we'll talk about the visuals and the soundtrack. The soundtrack for me is hit or miss. There are some Cyberspace levels that I really like, and there are ones that I don't like. And most of the vocal tracks in this game are some of my least favorite in the entire series. I'm not saying they're bad, because I know many people genuinely love these songs, but they're just not for me. And then there's the art direction. This game certainly isn't a visually stunning masterpiece, but it does look pretty good. The more realistic vibe fits the more mundane feel the story is trying to give off. And then breaking the realistic vision with Cyberspace is perfect in my eyes because it helps spice up the visuals. Later down the line, they also added the jukebox, which is great because now it adds more collectibles that you can run around and find, but it also allows you to change the music in the overworld so you're not stuck listening to the same track over and over for copious hours. The overworld tracks are pretty good. They get the job done, but they get really repetitive after an hour or two. I get sick of listening to them. The design of the enemies as well are also great. The look of them feels like they were just ripped straight out of Cyberspace. It fits so perfectly. So, where does that leave the base game of Sonic Frontiers? Like I said at the start, despite a few rough edges like the pop-in or the weird Cyberspace movement, this game is genuinely good and absolutely deserves a second chance. When you look at everything together, it's clear that Sega laid down a fantastic foundation. This game pulled Sonic out of the mediocrity of the 2010s and proved that the blue blur can truly thrive in an open zone format. It's a great experience that puts the franchise back on track. And that wraps up the base game. But the story of Sonic Frontiers didn't just end there. Sega had one more massive update up their sleeve to truly complete the experience. And that brings us to the Final Horizon DLC. Yeah, I'm not too sure if I like this or if it's one of the most wasted potential things I have ever played. The goal of this DLC was to obviously add more content and to offer a second ending after the criticism of the end. It involves Sonic immediately bringing his friends back to their former state, literally like 10 minutes after they just sacrificed themselves for Sonic, so that they can go look for the Chaos Emeralds while Sonic goes off somewhere else. In my opinion, I don't think that was the greatest way to start the story of this DLC. It kind of makes the cutscene before it feel very pointless. But anyway, jumping into gameplay, we now have 3 new characters to play as: Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Each of them have their own unique gameplay style separate from Sonic, and they all have their own skill trees and exclusive platforming challenges. My favorite part about this is that their moves take inspiration from across the series' roots. Like for instance, Amy has her cards from Sonic Origins, which were originally mentioned in the Sonic CD manual, Tails has his mech from Sonic Adventure 2, and Knuckles has his infinite jump glitch from Sonic Boom. Wait, what? Even Sonic gets a new move, being the Spin Dash. Although this isn't just unique to him, the other characters have it too, it's still a nice inclusion. So, I like that they attempted to bring back the multiple gameplay styles in this game. It makes it feel more like a Sonic adventure, but the execution is kind of mixed. They don't feel perfect to control. Knuckles' glide feels way too slippery to me, and for all of the other characters, if you don't have deceleration set to 100%, they feel so slippery to move around. So it's not perfect, but it's still enjoyable. So, while Knuckles, Tails, and Amy are looking for the emeralds, Sonic is busy scaling more towers and completing Coco challenges. Listen closely to what I have to say here. This is easily the single worst part in all of Sonic Frontiers. Vertical platforming itself in a Sonic game isn't terrible, but the way it was implemented in the Final Horizon DLC is so horrible. This genuinely feels like only up. I am certain that the developers put this here just to rage bait people. The platforming feels absolutely horrible. It really feels like you get punished for doing the right thing sometimes. I think easily my least favorite of the towers is the one with the stupid freaking fans. Everything is so finicky and the window for reaction time is so small. Because of that, you'll find yourself falling a lot. And what's your reward for climbing these towers? Some of the most unfun gameplay challenges ever. And take that word challenges lightly, because most of these aren't even hard. They're just slow and annoying. Apart from the Grandmaster Coco trial, that one gave me some troubles. So, is it worth putting yourself through the absolute torture of those towers and that trial? Kind of. Like I mentioned before, the end fight in the base game was complete garbage. But Sega actually listened, and Final Horizon completely replaces that garbage with an actual brawler boss fight, and it is absolute cinema. Sonic gets his cyber corruption under control and transforms into what people call Cyber Supersonic or Supersonic 2. It's easily one of the coolest things to come out of this franchise in years. The fight against Supreme and the end this time around is actually super fun. It really tests your skills, and once you master all the moves, it feels very rewarding. The music, the spectacle, the way Sonic and Sage team up, it almost makes climbing those stupid towers worth it. Almost. So what's the final verdict on the Final Horizon DLC? It's a bit of a mixed bag. The new characters are fun, but feel way too slippery. The vertical platforming feels like rage bait, and the trials are brutally unbalanced. But that final payoff, it's peak. If you have the patience for it, you definitely have to experience that finale. So looking back on Sonic Frontiers 4 years later, where do I stand? Like I said at the start, this was Sega's do or die moment, and they actually pulled it off. Is it perfect? No. The pop-in is annoying, the movement can be janky, and not every island is a winner. But, despite the rough edges, Sega took a massive gamble by throwing out the linear levels that we've had for a decade, and I have to respect them for actually trying something completely different. They took a huge leap of faith with this open zone style, and it really did pay off. Sonic Frontiers was exactly the wake-up call that this series needed. It proved that the blue blur can thrive in a massive open environment and set a genuinely exciting standard for whatever comes next. If you gave up on it early on like I did, or if the initial jank and empty spaces turned you off, I highly recommend jumping back in. Once you find your rhythm and stop forcing yourself to do every single random platforming challenge, the game really opens up and becomes an absolute blast to play. But what did you think about Sonic Frontiers? Did your opinion change over the last few years, or do you still feel the same way you did on launch day? Let me know. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.